Equations and mental math. An equation is a mathematical statement. Actually, it's two statements or expressions that are set equal to each other. So when you think of an equation, think of an equal sign. And you have one expression on one side and one expression on the other, and they're set equal to each other. So you could have 2 plus 3 equals 5. That would be an equation, and that would be a true statement. 2 plus 3 is 5. Now in algebra, we say what's the solution of an equation. And when we say solution, we're referring to an equation that also has a variable in it. And the solution would be a number that could be put in for the variable to make it a true statement, to make the equation a true statement. So let's look at an example. Let's say we have n plus 5 equals 14. And we want to find the solution. So we want to find what is the value of n that would make this equation a true statement. So what plus 5 would equal 14? Well, 9 plus 5 is 14. So 9 plus 5 is 14. So what we could say is the solution to this equation is n equals 9. Because if you substitute 9 in for n, you get a true statement. That's a solution to the equation. However, if we wanted to say n equals 7, that would not be a solution to this equation, because if you rewrote the equation with 7 instead of n, so it would be 7 plus 5 equals 14. Well, 7 plus 5 is 12. And if we wrote 12 equals 14, that is not a true statement. So n equals 7 is not a solution. Not a solution. Using mental math to solve equations. Now when we solve an equation, instead of checking whether or not a solution or a number is a solution to an equation, rather than doing that, solving an equation is coming up with our own possible solution. And it's coming up with a solution that'll make the equation a true statement. So let's look at this equation. 9 plus x equals 12. Now to use mental math, we need to ask ourselves a question. We have to ask, well, what number plus 9 would equal 12? So we need to ask ourselves a question, and then we need to find the answer to that question. Well, I know that 9 plus 3 is 12. So my solution that I'm going to put in is 3. So I want to say that x equals 3. And then we need to check that. So I'm going to rewrite the equation, but instead of x, I'm going to substitute it with a 3. So 9 plus 3 equals 12. And that checks out. 9 plus 3 does equal 12. So that equation has been solved. X equals 3 would be the solution. Let's look at another one. N minus 5 equals 10. So now I'm going to ask myself a question. What number minus 5 is going to equal 10? Well, using mental math, I know that 15 minus 5 equals 10. So I want to say that n equals 15. And to check that, I'm just going to replace the n. I'm going to substitute 15 in for the n. So I'll write 15 minus 5 equals 10. And that checks out. 15 minus 5 does equal 10. So n equals 15 is a solution. Alright, let's look at one more. Let's look at 4t equals 20. Okay, if you remember with variables, if you write a number directly next to a variable, that means multiplication. So we're talking about multiplication here. It's really 4 times t equals 20. So my question that I'm going to ask myself is, what number times 4 equals 20? Well, I know that 4 times 5 equals 20. So I can write that. I can say that t equals 5 because 4 times t is 20 and 4 times 5 is 20. So t must equal 5. So t equals 5 is a solution to this equation. A common equation that's used is the distance, speed, and time equation, which says that d equals rt. And the letters in this equation, d represents distance, and the r represents the rate, so how fast, and t represents the time. So distance equals the rate times the time. And if we're given two of those variables, we can solve, or we can find a solution to the equation. So let's look at a situation. Let's say we have a bird, and it's trained to fly back to its home. And this bird can travel at 50 miles per hour. So the bird can travel at 50 miles per hour. And we want to know how long is it going to take to get home if it's released 300 miles away from home. So here's its home. And the bird is over here. I can't draw a bird very well, so we'll make a bird. And there's its wing. There's our bird. It's not a very good one. But it's going to travel home 300 miles. And it's going to travel at a rate of 50 miles per hour. So we have this bird, and it's traveling, it's flying 50 miles per hour. We can use this equation, d equals rate times time, and find the missing variable. So what are we given? We're given 50 miles per hour. Well, that's going to be our rate. That's how fast it's going. And then the distance, we're also given 300 miles. So we know d. That's going to be 300 miles. So we just need to find t. So let's write the equation, but instead of all of the variables, we're going to replace the variables with the numbers that we know. So d, 300, equals the rate, 50, times the time, t. And we need to use mental math to ask ourselves, well, what number times 50 equals 300? Another way to think of that is 300 divided by 50 equals what number? Because if we know 50 times a number equals 300, then we know that 300 divided by 50 is going to give us that number. So 300 divided by 50. Now I know that's going to be 6. Because 6 times 5 is 30, so 6 times 50 would be 300. So 6. 6 times 0 is 0, 6 times 5 is 30, and we don't have a remainder. So our time is going to be 6, and that's going to be in hours, because our rate is miles per hour. So we need to figure out how many hours it takes to go 300 miles. So our t is going to equal 6 hours. And that's the answer.